Welcome back to Intro to Philosophy 1010. Our book is The World of Philosophy, an introductory reader by Stephen Kahn. And in this video, we're going over the article by Gilbert Ryle called The Ghost in the Machine. So this is for exam 3, and in this video, we're going over exam 3, part B, question 1 and 2. So question 1 is, what is the mind-body problem? And question 2 is, what are Ryle's criticisms of the received view? So the received view, according to Gilbert Ryle, who published this article, it's included in a larger work called The Concept of Mind, published in 1949. So the received view then is no longer the received view in 2020, and it has not been the received view for, I didn't think it was the received view back in 1949. The received view currently in academia is consciousness comes from material ingredients through the Darwinian process of evolution, that the source of life is inert physical atoms with no consciousness. When they combine in certain geometrical shapes with enough complexity, life is sparked. That is currently the received view. The received view that Gilbert Ryle was talking about is Descartes' philosophy that human beings are rational souls inside a material body, and consciousness or the soul is defined as thinking substance with no extension in space, whereas matter is described as unthinking substance with extension in space. So in 1949, in Oxford University, apparently most academics still believed in Descartes' worldview. So that was the first video for this exam 3 about Descartes' questioning of what can he believe. What is it possible for a human being to know, even if we assume that the entire world that we perceive is an illusion created by some powerful demon, so that even the laws of mathematics are incorrect? We can know one thing for certain, that we think, because doubting everything is a form of thinking, and if you're thinking, you must exist. I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. That's Descartes' philosophy of the self. I am a thinking thing. That's all I can know for sure. I might not be the body. He says I am not the body. He says we are all rational souls. He did not believe other animals, other forms of life were actually living beings. He thought they were complex machines because they do not have reason. Descartes believed that, and reason you can discern through the ability to use language. If you want to test whether you're talking to a complicated machine that looks like a human, engage that so-called person or apparent person in conversation. If they can follow your conversation and respond adequately, then that's the proof. We're going to see with Alan Turing, he'll talk about that issue. But right now, getting back to The Ghost of the Machine by Gilbert Ryle on page 106, he says, the official doctrine, all right, that's the subsection we're starting with. There is a doctrine about the nature and place of minds which is so prevalent among theorists and even among laymen that it deserves to be described as the official theory. So the question is, what are Ryle's criticisms of the received view? This is the received view, also known as the official theory. Most philosophers, psychologists, and religious teachers subscribe with minor reservations to its main articles, and although they admit certain theoretical difficulties in it, they tend to assume that these can be overcome without serious modifications being made to the architecture of the theory. Skipping down to the next paragraph, the official doctrine, which hails chiefly from Descartes, is something like this. With the doubtful exceptions of idiots and infants in arms, every human being has both a body and a mind. Some would prefer to say that every human being is both a body and a mind. His body and his mind are ordinarily harnessed together, but after the death of the body, his mind may continue to exist and function. So human bodies are in space, they're governed by mechanical laws, but minds are not in space, nor are their operations subject to mechanical laws. The first, the body is public, everyone can see your body, your mind is private, no one can see within your mind. So then he goes along on the right-hand column, page 106. It is customary to express this bifurcation of his two lives into the inner and the outer life. He says, this antithesis of outer and inner is, of course, meant to be construed as a metaphor, since minds, not being in space, could not be described as being spatially inside anything else. So, next paragraph, even when inner and outer are constructed as metaphors, the problem how a person's mind and body influence one another is notoriously charged with theoretical difficulties. How does an insubstantial mind, not extended in space, have any influence on the body? Where's the contact point, the transaction, the actual transaction between the episodes of the private history and those of the public history? That's Ryles' words. How does mind influence the body? How does the body influence the mind? They're two different types of substances. They can have no physical contact point because the one is not physical. So where is this relating point? Descartes inserted his idea of the animal spirits, a subtle form of matter that connects the two, but that doesn't solve the problem. Still, no matter how subtle, if it's still material, it's extended in space, how does it influence something not extended in space? That's the question that is notoriously difficult to answer. And on page 107 at the left-hand column, so where are these connecting points, these transactions between the mind and the body? Ryles says they can be inspected neither by introspection nor by the laboratory experiment. They are theoretical shuttlecocks which are forever being bandied from the physiologist back to the psychologist and from the psychologist back to the physiologist. Okay, so the physiologists who study the brain, they can't understand how physical operations in the brain, biochemical, electrical signals can produce our subjective awareness. And the psychologists can't explain how the subjective awareness influences the brain. So Gilbert Ryle's solution is that the mind is not different from the body, and that the belief that the mind is separate from the body is what he calls a category mistake. And his first example is about a university. So I'll just, actually, let me read the right-hand column, page 107. The absurdity of the official doctrine. Such in outline is the official theory. I shall often speak of it with deliberate abusiveness as the dogma of the ghost in the machine. So that's the famous phrase that people use. I hope to prove that it is entirely false, and false not in detail, but in principle. It is not merely an assemblage of particular mistakes. It is one big mistake, and a mistake of a special kind. It is, namely, a category mistake. All right, so I'm going to go back to this video, make sure it's still running. All right, so here's his example of a category mistake. Actually, if I read in the introductory notes on page 105, it's a better summary. So the idea of a ghost in the machine, that your mind is inside your body operating it somehow. Such a misconception he calls a category mistake, the sort of error that would be committed by one who, having been shown to colleges, classrooms, offices, playing fields, and libraries, would then ask, but where is the university? The university, of course, is not a separate building that one can see, and Ryle believes that the mind is not a separate entity that one can see. So the category mistake. Where's the university? Howard University. All right, or where's the college of, I live down the street from Howard University. So you go in there, you see the gym, you see the business building, you see the hospital. Okay, I've seen all these things, but when are you ever going to show me Howard University? So then this is Ryle's example. It is then to be explained to him that the university is not another collateral institution, some ulterior counterpart to the colleges, laboratories, and offices which he has seen. The university is just the way in which all that he has already seen is organized. All right, so there's no separate mind. Mind is just the way your brain is organized. It produces consciousness. This is Ryle's theory, which has enormous problems of its own, but that is not the question at hand. For part A, we have various questions. So as I mentioned in a previous video, This is discussing part 4 of our book, Reality. And it's divided into part A, B, C, and D. And part A is, I'm just going to go back here, and mind and body. So part 4 is called Reality. Actually, let me go back to the table of contents here. So part A is mind and body. Part B is the self. We'll be discussing Hinduism and Buddhism. Part C is identity. What is a person? How do you define a person? And part D is free will. So I'll be doing most of these videos on most of these readings, but not all of them. But I will be going over all the part B questions. So getting back to Ryles. What are Ryles' criticisms of the received view? So that's his basic criticism, that your consciousness is a byproduct of the way your body is organized. And if you go looking for a separate thing called your mind, you're making the category mistake. You're not understanding how the words are used properly. And he gives a series of examples. We went over the college example. Where's the university? You see all these buildings, but where's the university? It's the combination of them all. And he gives a couple more examples on page 108, the left-hand column near the bottom. He says, these illustrations of category mistakes have a common feature which must be noticed. The mistakes were made by people who did not know how to wield the concepts university, division, and team spirit. Their puzzles arose from inability to use certain items in the English vocabulary. I'm having a hard time with the English vocabulary today, but all right, so division, that was a military division, and then you see the battalions and the batteries and the squadrons walk by. Okay, I've seen them all, but where's the division? The division is just the combination of all these smaller units of soldiers. And esprit de corps, the team spirit. All right, this team has good team spirit. Well, I see he's talking about cricket, I don't know, but you see the goalie, you see, the forward. All right, I see all these positions, but who's playing team spirit? No, team spirit is the overall enthusiasm of everybody together. So it's a category mistake. One more category mistake that he gives is John Doe. He's told about the average taxpayer. So he's wondering, how come I never see this average taxpayer? On the right-hand column, page 108. So long as John Doe continues to think of the average taxpayer as a fellow citizen, he will tend to think of him as an elusive, insubstantial man, a ghost who is everywhere yet nowhere. So in the final paragraph, my destructive purpose is to show that a family of radical category mistakes is the source of the double life theory, meaning mind and body. The representation of a person as a ghost mysteriously ensconced in a machine derives from the argument. All right, so now let's just analyze a little bit of this argument that Gilbert Ryle is making back in 1949. So again, let me emphasize here the received view, the official doctrine that Gilbert Ryle is riling against with deliberate abusiveness, he says, is Descartes' theory that the mind is separate from the body. That is no longer the official doctrine of academia. It is treated with deliberate abusiveness, as Gilbert Ryle talks about. I know because I've been through academia and I've held on to not Descartes' position exactly, but a non-materialist philosophy, and it is not easy to express your opinions and maintain your academic sustainability when people are deliberately abusive to the entire philosophy of consciousness being a fundamental element of the cosmos. So, since that is my belief, and I think it's much more easily defended than the materialist philosophy that Ryle subscribes to, let me just get into some of his, what I consider to be gross oversights that seem to have not had the privilege of ever studying Immanuel Kant, for example. So over on the left, hand column of page 107. So he's saying, some people think that there's these two sides of ourselves, consciousness and matter, like flip sides of a coin, like male or female. And then he says, it is a necessary feature of what has physical existence that it is in space and time. It is a necessary feature of what has mental existence that it is in time, but not in space. All right, space and time. So he's writing in 1949. This is well after Einstein discovered the four-dimensional space-time, the fabric of space-time, general relativity. That's the theory of gravity that replaced Isaac Newton's theory of gravity, as this mysterious invisible force that acts instantaneously between objects. Einstein said, well, nothing travels faster than light, so gravity must also go no faster than light. And what is gravity? It's the if you use a four-dimensional fabric of space-time, the three-dimensional surface gets indented, and when things follow the contours of that space, they go down into the indentation of the fabric of space-time. We can't, or at least it's not easy to imagine a three-dimensional surface of a four-dimensional space-time. We can imagine a two-dimensional surface of a three-dimensional space, and that's why you see Einstein's theory explained with a trampoline with a bowling ball in the middle, and then you roll billiard balls and they go around that indentation and they orbit the bowling ball, which is like the sun, and the planets are going around it. But you have to extrapolate upwards to a higher dimensional understanding. But at any rate, my point here is, Gilbert Ryle says, it is a necessary feature of what has physical existence that it is in space and time. This is according to Descartes' view, which he's rejecting. It is a necessary feature of what has mental existence that it is in time but not in space. Well, Immanuel Kant showed us, responding to the empiricists, that space and time are not physical, empirically observable things. You can't see it, touch it, hear it, taste it, or smell it. It's an a priori category of the mind. It is the mind. Space and time are the mind. So the mind doesn't occupy space. It doesn't occupy time either. It's the source of space-time. That is what is implied by Einstein's theory, and Einstein was a big fan of Immanuel Kant. So Gilbert Ryle's, his rejection of Descartes' dualism, it seems to me, would do well to be updated with an understanding of 20th century physics, at least the most basic philosophical implications of it. Matter, what is matter? He's saying consciousness is a byproduct of matter, but it doesn't seem to me that he has a very sound understanding of his idea of the fundamental and only ingredient of existence, which is matter. Because as I've discussed in previous videos, the quantum mechanics says little particles only exist when you're observing them. When you're not, they merge together as waves of probability for where a particle might appear, were it that wave to be observed. So that was just one point when I was reading through here, this whole idea of space and time. If you haven't understood that in the context of 20th century physics, and if you don't mention anything about what Kant has to say about space and time and the material world, which he calls the thing in itself, which we can never know because it's always filtered through our categories of thought. Gilbert Ryle seems I'm sure he is aware of that philosophy, but he doesn't bring it up here, and yet he wants to speak with deliberate abusiveness. So if you speak that way, you invite it back at yourself. I'm not being abusive here, I don't think, but I'm just pointing out some fundamental, he wants the entire architecture of the theory of dualism to be overthrown. Okay, I can understand that, but the entire architecture of Newtonian physics upon which the theory of Darwinian evolution was built has been overthrown as well. So it looks like we've got a lot of broken architecture everywhere. I will discuss when I talk about Barbara Montero, another new article I've never read before. She says, what is, she says, oh, the mind-body problem. She's like, well, what is the body problem? She says, define matter for me. It seems that people aren't too keen on defining their fundamental terms. And so my theory, which is also influenced by Descartes, is that consciousness is the gravitational singularity. It is not extended in space. It's a point of infinite density. And I've discussed it before. I did my dissertation on that, but it is no longer a dualism. I'm saying consciousness, mind, and matter both emerge from the gravitational singularity, and that is why we can discern a mirror symmetry or a parallel between the laws of physics, the way matter works, and the laws of psychology, the way the mind works. And also, if you think of Kant, and Kant says space and time are categories of thought, okay, then if you trace space-time back to its source, you should come to the mind. Well, the source of space-time is the singularity of the Big Bang, which would imply the singularity is the psyche. All right, so that's just a little bit of food for thought. And in the next, I already put up the video about Paul Churchland, the mind-body problem, because I wanted you to have some, that's a more substantive article. It's about 10 pages as opposed to the smaller article we just went over. So the next video I'll be making is What Is It Like to Be a Bat by Thomas Nagel.